Welcome, Giants, to the latest edition of I Am Giant podcast, where on today's episode we talk to Sam Delaney, a broadcaster who's been involved in TV, radio, and has even got his own book out, Sort Your Head Out, which is a really good read. We had a really good conversation, quite funny, quite serious, and some real good laughs. So hopefully you enjoy the show, and if you give us some feedback at the end, it would be appreciated. So, welcome, Giants. On today's episode, I've got the amazing Sam Delaney joining me to talk about his story and bits and bobs. So, welcome, Sam. Thanks for joining me, mate.
Hi, Alex. Pleasure to be here, mate. Great to see you.
So, just to lay the story, I've been on your podcast a couple of times now, which kind of inspired me to go away and think about doing my own as well, and just going through loads of different podcasts that I've been on. It's just something I've always wanted to do. So, as mentioned before we started recording, you're on the top of the list for the guests that I wrote down and sort of manifested people coming in. So that's why we're here sitting talking to each other today. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, well, that's a real honour, mate. And it's always really nice to talk to you. And I think that in the sort of subjects that you and I talk about, it is a real pleasure to be invited on each other's podcasts and to chat, because it's the thing you discover, isn't it? Having sort of honest conversations with other blokes, and you can make connections so quickly. Like you and I met, we did one conversation. We'd never met before you first came on my podcast. We just had a bit of a chat online, and it's so quick because of the experiences. There's so many parallels between your experiences that you just form bonds much more quickly than back in the day, when our lives were a bit different and we were drinking and partying, and there was probably more connections that were sort of but a bit more superficial. Whereas now you meet people and you kind of feel like totally comfortable sharing everything with them right away, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, and the beauty of everything I do for a living and you do for a living. You're making those connections because we're real and raw and we're honest, and we validate each other's stories and feelings and stuff we've gone through, which we can talk about a bit later on. So for the folk tuning in today, just can you explain who Sam Delaney is and how you got to this point of doing podcasts and stuff like that?
Well, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist my whole career, which is I think I got my first job in '97. So I mean, that's a long time.
Long time.
And I worked in magazines, then newspapers, and radio and TV. So I've been a sort of a writer and a broadcaster for many years, and used to edit magazines and stuff. And then I mean, working on the radio on things like Talk Sport and Talk Radio and Five Live sort of gave me experience and a love for broadcasting. And probably my podcasting career took off in 2018 when I got together with my mate Andy Dawson, who I'd worked with for years, and he came to me with an idea for a podcast. We started doing it. It was called, and it took off and built a big audience. It's still going strong today. We put one out every day. And it's sort of become like, it went from being a hobby to being sort of a living. But aside from that, after doing that for a few years in lockdown, in that podcast, which is sort of like just a funny podcast, really, a couple of blokes talking bollocks to each other, I did from time to time bring up the fact that I was sober, and I did from time to time make reference to the fact that I used to have a problem with drugs and alcohol, and that mental health and looking after my mental health and seeing a therapist had become a big part of my life. And I would talk about it, but it's a sort of a light-hearted podcast, so I talk about it in a very self-deprecating way, but very honest. But it wouldn't be very earnest. And I got a really good reaction from people to anything that I shared on that podcast. And I thought, well, there might be an appetite for more of this, but not in the context of Top Flight Time Machine, because that's not what it's there for. So I started Substack, started writing about my experiences of mental health and addiction on there. And when I really enjoyed doing it. It seemed to be fairly popular. And so after about 6 months of writing, I then decided to start a podcast where I just spoke to other blokes who'd been through similar experiences, or sometimes they hadn't been through similar experiences. I really broadened it out. First, I was speaking to other people who'd been through alcoholism or drug addiction or something like that. Now I speak to people about all different aspects of mental health. Really, a really wide array of blokes sharing their stories. And, and out of that grew a book, which came out last year called Sort Your Head Out, which I really enjoyed putting out there. And so like it kind of just one thing led to another. I never sort of, I'd been a journalist for years covering everything from football to politics to music, but I'd never been very reflective about myself. I sort of just tried to be someone who could write and broadcast, in an entertaining way. But it's funny, it's almost like a form of emotional Tourette's. The moment you do start opening up and get feedback from people, you can't stop. And when you see that it makes just a small difference to other people, that it's another incentive to keep doing it. So more and more of my life just became centered upon telling my own story and listening to other people's and making connections. And yeah, it changed my life, really. I absolutely love it.
It's important because your podcast does come across really honest, and I think I enjoy being on it, and I still listen to it now. And I think for me, when you listen to podcasts or you read a book, you try to take one thing at least from everything that you're putting into your head to put into your own life. And I think that's something that's quite unique with podcasts. You get that experience and that validation that it's not just you that's going through that shit. So if you're sharing your story, I can go, oh, I thought it was just me that was going through that, and you get that shared experience that way.
Yeah, that phrase, I thought it was just me, is like one of the most sort of powerful phrases when I hear that from other people, when they read my story or they hear my story and people say, I thought it was just me. I think that's amazing, because I remember what it was like when I went through depression, bouts of severe anxiety, and then eventually addiction. I was always lost in that world, because blokes in particular, we all tend to put on a front when we're younger, and no one wants to look like they're falling behind or that they can't cope. And so I really, never, because everyone around me was probably behaving like that, I had no idea that what I was going through was pretty normal, and it's something that everyone has to have a taste of in their life to one degree or another, some sort of challenge when it comes to their mental health and their feelings. And so I was ashamed. I was so ashamed of the way I felt, because it didn't really align with the way I presented myself, which was always as a hyper confident sort of, entertaining, happy go lucky kind of guy. Inside, sometimes I've been like the consumed by the worst fear and self doubt. And I was so ashamed of it, because I never had the sense from anyone else, really. Certainly not anyone like me either. Like there was people you might see occasionally in the media opening up about themselves, but it seemed quite sort of like not the sort of Jack the lads who went to football and liked to go to the pub. It would always be your Stephen Fry's of this world, right? And nothing against him, of course. He's a great guy, but it was a little bit posh and a little bit earnest sometimes. Guys talking about their feelings, and I thought, oh, this isn't for me. I'll be an outcast. So whenever now that I do have the confidence to be honest about what I've been through, and anyone gets in touch with me and go, Jesus, I could relate to it so much, I thought it was just me. Yeah. I'm like, that's really the reason that I'm doing it.
That's what you want, innit? You want to help people by sharing your shit that they can then relate to that and open up and talk.
Yeah, that's it. And obviously there was people. I'm not saying there was no one in the past who I could relate to, but there was just a couple. I've got an older brother who gave up drinking probably about 5-6 years before I did, and he probably had the biggest influence on me, because he never preached about it. He never ever came to me and said, you want to look at your drinking or anything like that. He was fine. He would laugh when I would tell him stories. He never became sort of like putting any pressure on. But the thing was, I looked at him and a couple of other blokes I knew who were sober and had obviously been through shit, and I saw that they were still fun and it hadn't changed their personality fundamentally or completely. And I sort of looked at them as role models, and I suppose learned that there was a way of being sober, that there's a lot of cliches with being sober or being like sort of aware or in touch with your feelings or aware of your mental health. There certainly used to be a lot of cliches when I was younger, and it was a sort of like hippie stuff where you'd become a weirdo or a recluse, or you'd always want to talk about your feelings and you'd just bore everyone shitless, or you'd become preachy, or any of those other things. I just sort of started noticing other blokes who gave up drinking and were a bit more in touch with their feelings, but were still just as much of a laugh as the next person. you know. And I sort of started seeing a more positive way of being that guy. And so you sort of like you mentioned manifesting earlier. You sort of, I think one of the best things you can do when you're looking to make a change is create a vision of yourself that seems really appealing and positive. Whereas I think that in the past, when I was younger and I was partying all the time, the vision of me as a sober person or a person who was really engaged in therapy and all the things that go along with it, I'd just sort of have a vision of myself, oh God, I'll be broken down and miserable. You know, like the character they sing about in Country House, that Blur song, right, is sort of like, I remember when I was a kid listening to that song, and it seemed, and I read that they were singing about some bloke who used to work at their record company, and he used to be a laugh, and then he just had some sort of breakdown and retired to the country and became like a really weird guy who was just depressed and reclusive, and that to my mind was the picture of what guys in their 40s were like once they quit everything, right? But slowly I developed a different idea of what I could be like, an older bloke who didn't necessarily go completely weird. I mean, I am a bit weird, but so yeah, it's just about finding positive ideas about yourself, positive identities, and looking around for positive role models.
And I think that's it. Like, certainly when I was contemplating sort of when I stopped drinking, it was like the fun's going to stop. You're not going to go out at weekends. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. And you're worried if you're going to lose your mates, because obviously I've read your book that you mentioned there, and it was really, really good. And there was quite when you say your brother's sober now as well, which is brilliant, because there was quite a heavy drinking culture you growing up, and your brothers always sitting there with their cans of lager in the house and stuff like that. So it's having that role model is quite important. And I think no matter what it is, whether it's mental health, addiction, whatever, you look to someone to try and model yourself on it. And I got that when we joined the prison service. Pick someone that you think's doing a good job and copy them. And I think that's important. And I've lost some friends because of not going out and getting pissed at the weekend. But that's cool. I'm happy with that, because I know it's the right thing for me, and it's something that's important, that you've got to look after yourself no matter what it is.
It's a
but you will
natural
find other
filter.
people.
It's a natural filter, I think, isn't it? It's like I can't think of anyone I've really fallen out with over it. But if there's people I see less because I realise that unless I'm pissed, I'm not having fun with them. Then that's just
Yes,
one
they
of
just
life's
kind of slide away,
natural
don't
filters.
they?
They sort of slide away, and it's
So,
the same. It's not just people; it's things that you do as well. There are certain things I used to do that I don't anymore. That I realised it was because I didn't find those things inherently enjoyable. I just drank my way through them. Right? I'm trying to think of examples of that. Like, like once in a while, when I was younger, like my brothers would go, "Let's go to the horse racing this weekend, right? Let's go and have a flutter and go to the horse racing." And I used to go, "Oh yeah, brilliant! There's no football on. You can go along to that." And basically, you all get you steam into the beers, and you all get off your tits, and you gamble a load of money, and it's a fun day out, right? Now, me personally, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with going to horse racing, but I personally found that I'm not a gambler. Not that I've got moral objections to it. It's just not something that I either got a buzz out of or anything. It'd always make me feel miserable, really. Winning or losing, I just sort of feel like, I don't know, it didn't give me a good feeling. I didn't like the atmosphere at the races. I didn't particularly enjoy watching the horses race. There was nothing about it, but it was just one of those things that people go, right, we're all going to do this. Let's do this. It'll be great, right? And you go, oh, yeah. And there was parties and social engagements and all sorts of things that I used to turn up to. And effectively, drink was the reason I went. And very often it was the only way I could get through it, because only by being drunk could I enjoy certain things, like certain social engagements, certain work things that you had to do. I could only enjoy it if alcohol was involved to sort of like oil the wheels. So now I don't think, oh, what a shame I can't go to those things, I don't drink. I think, oh, how brilliant that I no longer drag myself along to things that aren't really aligned with my interests or what I want out of life. And then just to sort of make them bearable, get drunk or take drugs. And, and so life just becomes much more simple. I'm much better now at just saying one of my preferred phrases is just to say, no, I don't want to do that. Or, like when people used to invite you to things and you'd think to your mate or whoever, you have to make elaborate excuses. Now, I'm going to try and go, mate, but I might not be able to because blah, blah. Now I say, not that I recommend this because it is a bit rude, but I think it's funny. I go to people, no, I can't come to that because I don't want to. And I say it to close friends because usually they laugh at it, but it's true. Sometimes I just go, I don't want to come to it. It's nothing personal, but I just don't want to come to it. I'd rather just stay at home or do something else,
I found that the hardest bit when you stopped drinking because you didn't necessarily want to go to these things, but when you did, it was you got to that. I call it the arsehole hour. So it's like usually about 10, half 10, and they're all starting to get pissed. You just want a cup of tea and go to your bed.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? And you're just like, you're trying to get the wife out because she still drinks, and it's like, look, babe, come on, we need to go. Why? It's arsehole hour, but it's just one of the things you've got to deal with. But it was, and I found it difficult. Do you know what I mean? I found it difficult to start with because you're going to your first stag do, you're going to your first wedding. It's like that temptation's there, and you don't want to drink. And people are going, why are you not drinking? You'll have one. It's Billy stag do. Like, no, mate. And that's when you've got to tell them, look, I'm an alcoholic because it's still that stigma around it, isn't there?
Yeah, you got to own it. You got to, probably like my first year of not drinking, I found myself in a lot of those situations because I was yet to kind of come out and say, I've got a drink problem. I was an addict. I am an addict. I can't do it. I found that once I embraced it, because I wasn't sure myself, I was getting my head straight and I was sort of almost like questioning myself, like, why should I have given up? Was I really as bad as I thought? And, and in the end, you realize, okay, I know exactly what went on. I know what the problem was. I know I can't ever do this again. And I'm not going to be ashamed of it because the people who helped me get sober were former addicts themselves. My therapist, who I went to, sort of changed my life, really. She was a former alcoholic and heroin addict. And she had devoted her life to retraining as an addiction counsellor. And so her, as well as my brother and a couple of other people, had they been reticent to admit their addictions and their problems, then I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be happy and healthy with a great family and work that I enjoy. I would be possibly dead or certainly living a fucking much worse life than I am, right? So I sort of thought it's very important to sort of open up about what I went through and who I am, to benefit other people, but also for myself. Because, like you say, the moment I was honest, then what I found was people were so respectful. And I'd found for the first, I had one incident with a very old friend of mine within maybe the first 6 months where I'd gone down to Brighton to see her. I was with my wife and a few other mates, and we had a little bit of a reunion. And she was drunk and she was giving me absolute shit over not drinking. And it's the only time, really, which is not bad, that I've only had one incident of it. And she would not let up. Why aren't you drinking? What's the matter with you? Don't you even have a drink on Christmas Day? What have you done? Oh, there's a story here, obviously. She was all like this. Oh, obviously something, she was implying that I'd done something very bad, or she was digging at me, and she wouldn't let up the whole evening. And I got pretty upset to the extent that I nearly kind of walked out on the evening. I was convinced, don't let her get you. And the funny thing was, she fell off her chair that night. So pissed. We were in one pub, and she just literally fell off her fucking. We were 40 years old at the time. We're all parents, and she's just fucking bang on the floor, flat on her face, and then just got up, walked out, humiliated, and just got straight in the first taxi she saw. And I didn't speak to her again for about a year after that, because I think she probably didn't even remember the shit she'd given me, but she probably was embarrassed about herself. But that was the only time that anyone gave me shit. And looking back on it, I sort of resented her for a while. But the truth is, I think when she asked me, I'd been in a place to have gone, look, I haven't seen you for a couple of years, but I developed a very severe problem and I had to go to a rehab place and everything. I was in big trouble. Then I think actually she would have respected that, probably, drunk or not drunk, and said, oh, wow, well done you. But because I was doing all this I just don't feel like drinking anymore. And she was prodding and prodding. I was like, look, it's not a big deal. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't feel like drinking anymore. I wasn't ready to open up and tell the truth. Had I done, she probably would have left me alone. So that's fine. You don't have to feel under pressure. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, what? So is he saying that I need to be really honest from day one? No, you need to sort of come out when you feel comfortable with coming out for you. But just know that when you do, the support you get, and even strangers, like I've told this story a lot, but I was on my way to West Ham in Seville last year or the year before, where 2 years ago we were playing in Europe, and it was like a long train trip. My best mate across Europe to get to Seville to watch West Ham, and all the trains we were getting on were full with pissed up West Ham fans, and my mate was pissed, and I was like stone cold sober. So there was like an incident where I was like going to sit on a table, and it was one of those 4-person tables, and 3 of the blokes around there were right proper old school West Ham fans with fucking cans out and vodka out and traces of coke on the fucking table in the middle of the afternoon on this train. And I've walked up, looked at the spare chair, and without it saying to me, I walked off, and they took exception. They were like, "Oi, where are you going?" They didn't know me, right? And I turned around, I went, "I'm going to sit up here, lads. Sorry, nothing personal." And they were like, "What's the matter with us? Why you sit with us? What's the matter?" And I said to them, "I can see you all having a drink. Good luck to you. But I don't drink. I just want to have a kick up in a quiet thing. So it's not a seat for me." And "Why don't you drink?" And I went, "Because," I said, and I felt on the spot, it was on a really crowd track. I just went, "Because I was a fucking massive pisshead and a cokehead, and I had a big problem." I said, "And I've had to, and that's it." And they just went, "Oh, good on you," like that. And I went, "Oh, cheers." And they were really nice. I went away. I had a kick for an hour. When I woke up, I walked back to get a coffee. And when I walked past them, they stopped and said, "Sit down." So I did for 5 minutes and had a coffee while they bombarded me with questions about my sobriety. Because obviously they're all there. They've got to that stage in the piss up where they're starting to get the darkness is falling in on them. They're thinking, "Oh, maybe we should." So, yeah, I just noticed it's like, in a way, it's like magic. The moment you just say to anyone, "Oh, I had a problem," people just like leave you alone or show you respect or just kind. You think it's stigmatized, but I don't think it is too much from my experience.
No, I think it's getting better, isn't it? And it's the same with mental health and addiction, and it's like the more we talk about it, the more we open up about it, the more comfortable people get talking about it. And obviously, when we're wearing our hoodies and our t-shirts out in the supermarket, they'll come up and talk to you about mental health issues and that. And what I've found, because obviously we all do sobriety differently, right? And I go to AA, and I got my 2-year chip last night. So
nice one,
it's
mate.
one of these things that I'm happy to talk to people about that, and because it's what works for you. And I think that's why we're all different. So not everyone that's suffering from mental health needs to come to Andy's Man Club, and not everyone that's alcoholic goes to AA. There's loads of things out there that you can do all yourself. But it took me a while to go through the doors of AA. And it was just like, obviously when we spoke about another organisation, Dry, that they do this sober, and there's loads of things out there. So there's different options for people, so they don't have to go down the traditional route.
No, I didn't do. I've never done the 12 steps. I've been to meetings, and like I'll still dip in and out of meetings. For me, it's like in the spirit of what we said at the beginning: connections, talking to people, feeling validated, just just making sort of connections with different sorts of people and sharing your experiences. There's something just really powerful about that, and it can really help you. I'm not the sort of person, I can't say I've ever felt tempted to use drugs or drink. So I don't, it's not in situations like that. It's more just when I'm going through a phase of feeling a bit miserable, anxious, whatever. I'll sometimes go on a Zoom meeting to an AA or sometimes a CA meeting. I find it like, I just find it like a really soothing experience. That usually puts me in a better mood. But no, I never did it in the formal getting a sponsor doing 12 steps, because I just did my own thing. But I did a lot of reading around 12 steps, and I spoke to a lot of people. My therapist is very much an advocate of 12 steps, and I think she sort of took me through them in a way, in her own way. And so, I have a pick, myself personally, I have a pick and mix approach to like recovery. Do you know what I mean? I like to take a little bit of everything. mostly talking to people like yourself, people who've been through similar experiences, people who've got a lot of wisdom as a result. I read around it. I go to some meetings. I go to a therapist, and sometimes you just pick. I mean, I read a lot of novels, and there's in practically every novel I read, irrespective of genre, I'll always highlight about, because I read them on the Kindle, so I highlight the bits that I want to remember. And every time I read a book, there'll be like a passage somewhere in the book that for me somehow relates, even if it's not specifically talking about recovery. The thought in it is to me like sort of an idea or an insight that is related to recovery. And so I collect those. So it's like every day you're seeing something in the world around you that sort of helps your perspective on life.
And there was a few of those highlight. I'm not as fancy as a Kindle. I like a book.
Yeah.
So there was a few of those things that I would have highlighted if I was on a Kindle and reading your book, and it was one of the ones that had been on since I spoke to you, because I think you just launched it when we spoke the first time.
It was about a year ago, yeah.
Yeah, and I put it on my Amazon list, and it's sat there, and it's one of these ones. I've got a load of books on my list, and I always go to the ones. Same when I pick one off the shelf, I go to one that attracts me to it.
Yeah.
And then obviously, and one of the reasons when I started the podcast, I was attracted to your book, so that's why you were top of my list. So I read the book and I absolutely loved it.
Nice one, Alex.
It was entertaining. There's trauma in there. There's obviously addiction issues in there. It's got everything. But I was talking to my coach the other day, and I was getting her to listen to some of my podcasts, and she listened to. I says, "What ones have you listened to?" She went, "I've listened to the Sam Bollocks one." And I was like, right, all right, that's Sam Delaney, because obviously everyone. So he stays apart. And it was really good. Do you know what I mean? And I think I could relate to so much in that. And like I said to her, I says it's my story, but it's not my story. And I think I've just actually someone else mentions me there, and I've just said, look, you need to read this book because you will relate to something in that book that you go, fuck me, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people have said that. I really appreciate you saying it because, writing a book like that, when you get really deep into it, it was the first, like I've written books in the past, and one of them that I wrote about maybe 12, 13 years ago, maybe more than that now, called Night of the Living Dad. There was some similarities with the book that with Sort Your Head Out, but I was much younger then. I hadn't been through all the things that I'd been through. But it was similar in that there was a bit of memoir to it. It was about my first year being a dad and how your life changes. But at the time, I still, because I think I hadn't been through recovery and I hadn't, had therapy or really got in touch at all with my own feelings or my set idea of who I was. I still was like writing in a way that was, first and foremost, I wanted to be funny and to make people laugh and make it sound sort of, just kind of, I was a little bit detached. I just wanted to be entertaining. And then when I wrote Sort My Head Out, it was like, if it was entertaining, that was a bonus. But first and foremost, I just wanted to be honest and sincere. Do you know what I mean? But when I wrote like that was a big departure for me because my whole life I'd just been trying to make people laugh, really. And so when I was just spewing my guts on the page about even the little things that still lived with me, things that had upset me at school, little remarks that people had made, I thought, this is so trivial. This is so pathetic, right? And I was thinking to myself, I feel such a knob admitting this stuff, right? About myself and about the things that like still live with me and maybe affected my self-esteem or the way I feel about myself, right? Some of them were big, like say if you talk about my relationship with my dad or my parents' divorce, those things I guess are legitimately big. But some of them are just like little arguments I had at school or things that my brothers said to me when I was younger. And I was so embarrassed, but I just thought, fuck it, I don't care, I'm going to write it all down because some of it's funny, but all of it's true. So I wrote all of it down, and then the book comes out and you're shitting yourself because you think, I am like a fucking sitting duck here for accusations of being self-indulgent, navel-gazing, snowflake, fucking look at him, boo-hoo, he's had an easy life and he's fucking crying because his parents got divorced or whatever, because you're very conscious of the fact that you think, oh, well, there's people who've had much tougher life than me. And I was like, but the truth is that, you know, I suppose the point I'm trying to make in the book is, look, no matter who you are, what you've been through, what your background is, you know, we've all had fucking tough times. We're all human beings, so we all have feelings, and sometimes we all feel pain, right? And I suppose if there's any message I'm trying to convey in the book is just accept that you're a human and that you will feel pain, acknowledge that pain, and understand that, you know, you should treat yourself with a bit of kindness and love, right? Rather than, and so that's all I was trying to do. And I was trying to demonstrate, like, look, even if you've not been through some huge trauma, like a bereavement, or, you know, the example I always use is, you know, when you think of trauma, you can only think of guys who've been fighting in Afghanistan and seen their mate blown up. That's like, as a man, that's your idea of legitimate trauma. And anything below that level, you say, it's bollocks, toughen up, right? But in the book, I'm just trying to say, look, man, I've had just loads of, it's not like some one big thing. It's just all the little knocks and bruises you have through a normal life of being just a normal lad. You know, it can all get on top unless you acknowledge it and reflect upon it and try to treat yourself with a bit of compassion. It can all build up. And the next thing you know, you're fucking pouring vodka in your orange juice in the morning at 8 a.m., which is where I ended up. And I didn't know why I was doing that. I remember one morning thinking, why am I doing this for? This is sort of weird shit you see in films that like nutters do, right? And I'm like, that's not me. I'm downstairs making a cup of tea for my wife, getting the kids' breakfast ready. I'm off to do a pretty responsible job, a job that I was very lucky to have, living in a nice house. And I'm thinking, how did this happen? This has just happened all of a sudden. I'm literally thinking, I'm going to have a quick vodka. It will like help me feel less hungover, right? And I had no idea why it was happening. I just knew it was. And it was just like weird. It was like an out of body experience, you know, or when I found myself doing cocaine in the morning, right? As soon as I got into my office, I'd be like, right, I'm just going to put the kettle on. And while that's boiling, I'll go and do a quick line of Charlie in the disabled toilets. And then I'll come back out and finish making my cup of tea. Right. And like, I kept like almost like as if I was looking down on myself, thinking, look at what you've become. You know, you used to be quite a healthy or reasonably healthy and well-behaved sort of guy. How's this happened? I had no fucking idea. It was only when I threw myself at the mercy of someone who had been through it, right? And she told me, right, this is what has become of you. This is where you are. You are an addict and you are in a dangerous situation. But what we're going to do is, if you commit to stopping, I will commit to showing you why and how you have arrived at this place. And by understanding that, you will then start to untangle all these things that you've tried to ignore for years. And that will make the future so much easier for you. And you won't feel the need to have to run away from your feelings with drugs and alcohol anymore. That's not how she phrased it, but that's a summary of what I think, you know, my therapist said to me when I went to see her, and that is actually what happened.
And I think it's important to highlight that we've all got our own issues. Do you know what I mean? And your issues are your issues, and they're massive to you, and it doesn't matter what you've been through. And it just when you're talking about the trauma and that, and especially some of the stuff that you put in your book, and the one thing that stuck out to me, and I probably found this the funniest part of the book, and I actually remember reading it in bed and snorting, and the wife's like, "What are you laughing at?" Well, it doesn't matter, you wouldn't understand. And it's trauma at school. And for those female listeners that are tuning in won't know that the coffin drop. That all teenage boys go through at school, which is absolutely horrendous. And I think that would leave a scar on everyone. So do you want to explain your coffin drop moment in your book?
Yeah. Well, so it was coffin drop day. I think it was about when you're about 12, they do it. And it basically, if you don't, I don't know if they do it anymore. My son's 12 and he's never heard of it. And he thinks, I've been telling him about it and he thinks it's a wind up. But anyway, right. Certainly they used to do it back in the 80s. All the boys queue up in the nurse's office, outside the nurse's office. You go in, you drop your pants. The nurse cups your ball bag in her hand and then tells you to cough, right?
Yeah.
And when you cough, they can feel whether or not your testicles have descended or not, right? And if they haven't, well, that's a problem, right? Because your balls are supposed to drop. Just a quick biology lesson. You're born and your testicles are up sort of somewhere in your pelvis, sort of thing, right? And then at around 12, 11 or 12, they suddenly drop down, but they can get stuck. So anyway, I go along, and my brothers, who are all a lot older than me, they're like 8, 9 years older than me. They're winding me up, right? Because they're going, oh, cough and drop day. Oh, no, mate, fucking hell. And I'm shitting myself going, oh, what happens? What happens? And they're going, oh, it's really bad. They grab your balls really hard. It's painful, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go, Mum. And she's going, don't be silly. They're exaggerating, right? And they go, yeah. Plus, as well, if you've got a fit nurse, it's really bad because a lot of lads, they get a hard-on, right? And I'm thinking, oh, you can imagine at 12, like, it's something that fucking, it's the stuff nightmares are made of because you're always getting unexpected erections anyway, right? And they go, yeah. At our school, because they went to a different school to me, yeah, what they did was they kept a metal spoon in a bowl of ice. And that meant that if anyone got a hard-on, they'd just quickly whack your willy with this ice-cold spoon, right? And I'm like, and they told me about this. I remember them going, like, they reckon that there was this nerd in their school called Dorian. And my brother Cass reckoned that he went in ahead of him to the cough and drop. And they just heard the nurse saying, control yourself, Dorian! Whack! Whacking his hard on with the collar. Anyway, all these stories made me very, very anxious. So by the time I got to the front of the queue at my cough and drop, I was like dizzy with fear and nausea and anxiety about the whole situation. And I walked in, and sure enough, there's a nurse there, and she's gone, drop your pants, and she's cupped my scrotum. And all of it is just, all the rush of fear and anxiety has hit me all at once. I've gone dizzy, and with my pants around my ankles, I've collapsed on the floor, fainted, right? And when I've come round, I'm in the sick bay. You know, all schools have a sick bay, don't they? And I'm lying on like a gurney, right? And my trousers and pants have been pulled back up, but they're all damp, right? Because it turns out that I've fucking pissed myself, right? But what made it worse was the only other person in the sick bay, right, was this girl. I think I changed her name in the book, but her real name was Emma. And she was like one of the hottest girls in the year, and she was one of those very aloof girls who like barely spoke to you, but like, you know, you kind of, oh my god, there she is. You get like, you'd blush just to be in her presence. And I opened my eyes, and I've never spoken to her before, and she sat there in the sick bay in this small room with me. I don't know what she's doing there, and I've gone, oh, all right, and she's just sort of rolled her eyes like, ugh. And then so that's not gone well. And then the nurse has come in, and I've gone to the nurse, what happened? And she said, oh, you passed out and you wet yourself whilst you were having your cough and drop. But don't worry, we've called your mummy and she's on her way to pick you up. And that was all said in front of this girl, the prettiest girl in the year. I had a question. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, fuck, why did she say it in front of her? Then my mum turns up and the nurse says, yeah, you better take him home. Just so you know, when he passed out, it wasn't just normal. He twitched around on the floor a bit like he was having a seizure. So you should get him checked out for that, right? And I'm like, what the fuck? And then as we're leaving to go, oh, and by the way, we did just have enough time to check him before he went down, and his left testicle has not descended, right? So we're driving home in the rain, and my mum's just like, me and my mum are both quiet, and I'm sitting there thinking, fucking hell. I've literally just passed out, pissed myself, and found out that I'm an epileptic with one bollock. It's like the worst day of my whole fucking life, right? And
but you didn't get a hard one.
I didn't get a hard on. That was the only good thing that happened all day, was that I didn't get a hard on. But I genuinely did have to have an operation to manually descend my testicle a few months later. And that wasn't, I don't think I wrote about that bit, but that weren't fucking pretty either.
No, it's not nice. No, it can't be. But I think, and you know what? She just, and even just listening to it, honestly, I was killing myself reading it, but it transported me right back to it. And I could even picture the nurse's door, and there's a queue and going and winding each other up. You're going to get hard on. You're going We were very sophisticated. We had the nurse we had a big wooden spoon and just sat on the desk. You're terrified that she's going to
hit your willy.
Oh man,
but fucking hell. I mean,
No
Jesus
wonder, no
Christ.
wonder we don't want to talk to anyone. You know what I mean? We're traumatised at school.
I know. Exactly. They can't fucking go around hitting boys' willies with spoons. It's madness.
And they probably wouldn't be allowed to do that now anyway, would they? You know what I mean, when
I
you
know
think
you've
about
got a
it.
daughter, haven't you? You don't? Do you have a son? I
Yeah,
can't
I've got
remember.
no, I've
Right.
got two girls. So.
Two girls, yeah. Yeah, so I got a girl and a boy, and my son says, "Nah, I'm pretty sure they don't do that anymore, Dad." And my daughter says she's older, she's in sixth form. She said, "I never heard
Yeah.
about it from any of the
Yeah.
boys at school." And I've said it to a few people, and they've gone, "What are you talking about? That's not a thing." So I don't know. Maybe it was a thing. Maybe it was a Thatcher thing. Like I was at school in the Thatcher era, and maybe it was one of her fucking harebrained policies.
Stole our milk and then
Yeah,
made
stole
us
our
get
milk and then
caffeine.
fucking ordered our fucking testicles to be
Mix
examined
us up.
and
Yeah,
our
yeah.
penises to be hit with
I know,
spoons.
I know, mad. The things that the younger generation will never understand. But honestly, the book was brilliant, and I took a lot out of it. I really did. And another one that kind of stuck with me was we should be working in our spare time, which I think something you've adapted to. And certainly something I've learned to do now as well, and just manage my time better. So I have more time to do the stuff that I want to do, whether it's with myself or with my family, because we do. And on the grand scheme of things, we're only working and we're only here for a short time, so we need to make the most of our time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my thing really is about balance, like rest and work, and that's what my new book's about that I'm working on at the moment. Is like I found that after I gave up drinking for the first couple of years of sobriety, I kind of threw myself so heavily into overwork that what became apparent was that, you know, in retrospect, I think, yeah, of course, the cliche is I replaced one addiction with another, right? So I just wanted distraction the whole time. I didn't like to sit still. I didn't like to be just alone with my own thoughts and feelings. I had to constantly make myself like distracted, and work and exercise actually completely took over from drink and drugs. But in another way, I realized that actually that kind of need to be busy and to be doing something and to be achieving had always been there. And it was completely interconnected with the drinking. And in many ways, the drinking and drugs were a symptom of that need to always be on the go, because I had it for whatever reasons. I think probably the same reasons that I was a drinker. I think it was like a lot of unresolved trauma. It was a lot of insecurity about myself, right? It was a lot of fear of addressing my feelings about things. And I thought, if I can just work really hard and get on in life and achieve things and be admired for my success, do you know what I mean? And make money and all of these things, then everything else will be all right. Everything else will melt away, right? And that I can outrun all of my problems by just throwing myself into my career and just achieving. But the thing is, that was all rooted in insecurity. And also, it was so exhausting. I've so overstretched myself and so overwhelmed myself at times that I drinking and drugs to a large degree in the final years of my drinking and drug taking were just like being used to sort of almost support my exhausting lifestyle, you know, where I was just constantly on the go and I would say yes to everything. And like work, I was just saying yes to everything, right? No matter how demanding. And I convinced myself I could juggle it all and be a good dad and husband and socialize too. And it just was unrealistic and impossible. But no one tells you that. Instead, you get quite a lot of praise. You know, like no one praises you for being an alcoholic, but you do get quite a lot of validation and affirmation for being a workaholic, you know, because people go, it's amazing, you're doing so well. I don't know how you do it. Or you know, God, it's so amazing. So, you know, I'm not drinking drugs on the head, but the work just gets worse and worse and worse. Like I'm doing more and more and more. And I'm thinking, this is great. And I'm thinking, this is great. I gave up drinking drugs. And now my reward is that my career's flying higher than ever. And I'm doing brilliant. And I also wanted to get fit and healthy because I'd like really let myself go with the drinking. So I start like doing really over exercising, dieting to an extent that was probably pretty unhealthy, especially considering the amount of energy that I was using up on work and exercise. So, you know, and as a result, I was still pretty absent for the first 2 years of my sobriety. I was still pretty absent for my wife and kids, as absent as I'd been when I was drinking in a way, because I was just always working. And when I was at home, I was exhausted. So I'd congratulate myself on not being hungover like I had been, but I might as well have been, because I would finish work on a Friday and I would come home and I'd literally just, the first thing I'd do is just like fall onto the bed, right? I finished early on Friday, so I'd come home mid-afternoon, but I'd fall on the bed and I'd sleep until dinner time. I'd wake up, have my dinner, and then sort of fall asleep on the sofa. And then all weekend, I was pretty like spaced out, right? Exhausted. And then it'd start all over again on Monday. And I hadn't really addressed any of the demons that had underpinned my drinking and drug habits, right? I'd just carried on running and requiring sort of external things to make myself feel better. I think that a big turning point was probably COVID and lockdown, because that forces you to stay home. It forced me to really immerse myself more in the lessons that you learn in recovery about, letting go of stuff you can't control. And so I sort of gave in to a huge extent to lockdown without excessive amounts of anxiety. I thought, I'm just going to embrace this. And it led to a lot of time where you had no choice but to relax and chill out. You had no control over things. And I just really did a lot of reflecting. And I came out the other side with a very different approach to life and to my career. And my biggest thing was I had to learn to rest. I had to learn to treat myself with a bit of kindness, and I had to learn to say no to things and have balance in my life, So now I'm a committed napper. Even today, before speaking to you, this morning, I had a nap at midday till 1, right? I got up at 1, I had something to eat, then I had a meeting before this, and then that's it. But I am delighted, and I was actually worried that I hadn't had a nap all week, because sometimes I like to try and have at least a short half-hour nap every day, right? I used to associate that sort of shit with old women, because it's what my grandma used to do. If I go and visit her, she'd sling me out of the house at like mid-afternoon, because she'd go, "You got to go now because I've got to have my nap." I'd be like, "What? You can't throw me out." She'd go, "Yeah, you can come back later, but I don't want you here when I'm sleeping." So I thought it's an old woman thing, but I do it because I believe in it. To me, that's like a little ritual that means that no matter what else I've got going on, if I'm really busy, I know that I'm looking after myself and not burning myself out completely. Do you know what I mean? I was just in a perpetual state of burnout for years and years. So my new book is about that burnout, work addiction, and trying to, my sort of desire to try and find the right balance for me.
And that's important. I use transcendental meditation, so meditate first thing in the morning, and then I meditate before 4 o'clock, 4:30, and it's like having a nap. It's like it gives you that wee boost then, and sleep's important, isn't it? Because that's when your body's recovering as well. So it's good for your mental health to have that balance.
Oh yeah, I think it's like a cheat code for your mental health, really, if you can call it a cheat code. But do you know what I mean? It's like if you sleep, everything feels better. Everything you can work.
I've got a big whiteboard there, and I try and like positive things. So one of them is like influencers to motivators on social media, and I can and I can't, and changing these things around. And one of them is the Netflix box sets to sleep. So if you've got 2 hours to kill, like, don't watch Netflix. Have a sleep. It's more beneficial for you.
Yeah. No, I do that, and like I realised that I think that I had the emotional maturity of a toddler, right into my 40s. What I mean by that is that when you've got small kids, you notice that you think of the amount of times when you've got a toddler who is crying and angry, and you're trying to tell them, well, the thing is, you're tired, you should have a nap. Or you're saying, well, you're hungry, you should have something to eat, right? And they go, especially if you tell them to have a nap, they go, I'm not tired. Even my son now, he's 12, and even the other night, he sort of made this kind of case to me and my missus that, we shouldn't be giving him a bedtime, and that we should trust him enough to have the responsibility of setting his own bedtime, right? So I'm a bit of a believer when kids come to you with this shit, a lot of time I call their bluff and go, all right, fine. What time are you going to go to bed then? And he goes, well, I don't know. I'll see when I feel tired. I go, all right, fine. I'll go, I'm going to bed at I'll be up in bed about 9:30, probably reading my book, but you do what you want, mate. And then he stays up till 10 and he's fucking freaking out, having like borderline panic attack in bed, right? And like he's like, oh, Dad, I feel really weird, right? And I go, yeah, you're tired. I'm not tired. I'm really awake. I just feel really like, I don't know what it is. I feel like stressed. And I go, yeah, that's tiredness, mate. And he said, no, it's definitely not tiredness. And the thing is, for years, I had that same thing. I didn't recognize what the matter was, right? I'd suddenly get angry or argumentative. I'd have an argument with my wife, or I'd like get moody, or I'd think, I'm really stressed. I know, I'll have a drink because that'll chill me out, right? Or whatever. And the thing was, I couldn't sometimes see that I was just simply tired and needed to lie down, right? It took me years to, and that's what I mean when I say in the book, like, recognize your own feelings, understand them, acknowledge them, right? So now, sometimes I feel tired or stressed or anxious or very unfocused. So I'm trying to write something or do something and I just can't fucking get it done. You get really frustrated. And what's the matter with me today? And then I just always think, I think I just need a nap. I think I need a rest, right? It doesn't have to be real sleep. Some people can't sleep like that, but you need to do something to switch off. But me personally, I will just go. I'm quite adept at falling to sleep quite quickly. I can go upstairs to my bed, lie on the bed, right, shut my eyes and just get off to sleep pretty quickly, right? And sometimes I set an alarm, sometimes I don't, but I usually will wake up within half an hour. And then that's it. I have a cup of tea and bang, everything's gone. I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. I'm able to work with focus, and this is like, I'm sure a lot of people learn this at a much earlier stage in adulthood. But I think for years, I wasn't able to recognize if I felt stressed or angry or frustrated or like I had brain fog. I would never think, why is that? I'd just accept it as fact. I'd just say, well, I'm angry. So I'm going to have an argument with someone now. I'm going to have to shout at someone now because that's just the way things are.
Yeah. But I think that does come with age, doesn't it? As we start to realise that our mum and dads weren't talking pish when they were telling us to do this, that, and the next thing. You're going,
Yeah.
well, they were right. Do you know what I mean? It's mad.
Yeah.
It's mad. So we'll start winding up there. So what one thing would you want listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Just treat yourself with kindness. Treat yourself with kindness. That's the main thing that men in particular really struggle with. Most of our, I think, internal monologues are beating ourselves up on things that we haven't done or we haven't got right, or why we're weak or we're failures, or all of these fucking words are the ones that swim around in so many guys' heads. And it's like, stop that, treat yourself with kindness, know that you're doing well, but that all of us feel like shit sometimes. And when you do feel like shit, treat yourself like you would probably treat your mate if he came to you. Say nice things, do nice things, treat yourself kindly with a bit of love.
The last question I'm going to ask you is one I've asked all my guests so far is, what's your one guilty pleasure song? That one song that when you hear it come on, you've got to turn it up. You can't skip it and you sing it till you can't sing anymore.
I don't have any. I mean, if it's a guilty pleasure song, like, so what you mean is something that's a bit corny or something like that.
That you shouldn't really like, but you've got to turn it. So my colleagues was Barbie Girl, for example.
Well, I mean, a lot of my favourite songs would probably be classed by many people as corny because I love like disco music, 80s soul music. I like, but something came up on like Twitter the other day, a YouTube clip of Top of the Pops, and it was that Australian band called Mental as Anything. Live It Up. Right.
Yeah,
And I remember that, and sort of, I remember regarding it as a novelty song when I was a kid. Right. And it came on, I was like, this is an absolute banging song. So if you ask me another week, I'll probably say something else. But this week, I've been listening to that. I can't stop listening to it. So yeah, Mental as Anything, Live It Up.
Thanks again for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope they get the same enjoyment as listening to this as I did recording it. So I'll put in the show notes the link to your social media and that, and obviously the book. I would recommend anyone reading it.
Well, it's out in paper. This is quite timely because it just came out in paperback a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So it means it's cheaper. So get involved. Cheaper.
Yeah, it's well worth it. Well worth a read, and you'll learn something out of it as well. So, but thanks for coming on, mate.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.